All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. Now, for the first time in franchise history, the Minnesota Timberwolves made the Western Conference Finals in consecutive years, but the T Wolves still cannot get over that hump in order to get to the NBA Finals. It only took the Oklahoma City Thunder 5 games to dispatch of the Timberwolves, with three of Minnesota's losses coming by 15 points or more. And in Wednesday night's closeout game, the Timberwolves lost by 30 points. But honestly, that final score really was not indicative of how the Thunder dominated them. I mean, you look at it, Minnesota was down 26-9 after the first quarter. And at the half, they were down 65-32. And it makes you wonder if Minnesota's bags were packed already for Cancun, because you look at that and you got to say, where was the intensity? Your season is on the line. And it's one of those where OKC played like a team whose season was on the line. They went out there with bad intentions. They went out there looking to close out Minnesota, and they did it emphatically. Okay, you look at this series, and credit to the Thunder because they made Anthony Edwards a non factor over the final 2 games of the series. We're talking about Ant-Man, a guy who can score 30 points in a blink of an eye, but he was limited to just 35 points over the final 2 games. He averaged 23 points per game for the series, but he was held under 20 points in 3 of those 5 games. So last year, it was Luca, Kyrie, and the Dallas Mavericks who stopped Ant-Man and the Timberwolves. While this time it was SGA and company in Oklahoma City, excuse me. Credit to the Thunder defensively because they were hell bent on not letting Ant-Man be the factor offensively that Minnesota needed him to be. Basically, you look at what the Thunder did. They did to Ant-Man what Ant-Man has been doing to people in the postseason over the last couple of years, at least in the first 2 rounds. So, with that said, second time in a row, we've seen Minnesota get to the Western Conference Finals. And for the second consecutive year, they were denied the Western Conference Championship. So, of course, when it's all said and done, anytime that you see a team like the Timberwolves, you ask yourself, what can they do to get over that hump and take this franchise to the next level? I mean, it's one of those where you've got to crawl before you can walk. Okay, and I think the people that want that follow Anthony Edwards, that follow the Minnesota Timberwolves, they're not worried about this team walking. They want to see them sprint and try to get to that next step and win the title. But nonetheless, it's going to start, and it has to start with Anthony Edwards. I mean, Ant Man is one of the youngest and brightest stars in the NBA. Nobody should ever deny that. Okay. And as good as Ant Man is, he has to find a way to take his game to the next level in these situations. You look at Ant Man in the first 2 rounds last year, the playoffs, and in the first 2 rounds this year. It was kind of that, over my dead body mentality. And I wanted to go out there and punk my opponent. And it just didn't carry over to the Western Conference Finals either time around. Now, don't get me wrong. Every round of the playoffs that you advance, it's going to get tougher. When it's all said and done, you've got to find a way to take your game to the next level. And by hook or by crook, by any means necessary, if you're Anthony Edwards, you got to go out there and find a way to win. I look at the one of the biggest differences for me in this series. You look at the Thunder; they only had 3 guys scoring double figures, and that was their 3 big guys who averaged in double figures at least for the series. That's SGA, Chet Holmgren, and Jalen Williams. But those 3 guys right there accounted for more than 71 points per game. Okay, you look at Minnesota. You had 5 guys who scored in double figures, but none of them really went out there and made an impact. And you look at some of the breakdown between SGA and Ant Man. SGA, he averaged more than 31 points for the series, but guess what? He lived at the free throw line. SGA attempted 51 free throws for this series. He made 44 of those shots. Ant-Man on the other side was 22 of 32 from the line. All right. Ant-Man did not shoot good uh, from behind the three-point line. He was 11 of 39 for the series. And again, it's one of those where you know what? You got to go out there and take care of your business. Uh, I think for me, there's going to be a lot of questions for this Minnesota Timberwolves team heading into the offseason. One big question is, will Julius Randle, uh, exercise his player option? I'm not sure. Okay, he's set to earn nearly $31 million next season. You knew that Julius Randle was playing for a contract this year, and it's one of those where maybe he feels like the time is right for him to cash in. I'm not sure. We got to wait and see. That's going to be a big factor, and it's a big question, in my opinion, that has to be asked and answered for this Minnesota squad going into next season. For me, another big question is, will Minnesota be able to keep playing 4-on-5 on offense? And I'm talking about Rudy Gobert. Okay, Rudy Gobert, he's not the defensive presence, if you will, like he once was. All right. I know he shined big at a couple of points in the Lakers series. Granted, the Lakers are not the Oklahoma City Thunder, but it's one of those where you gave up a lot to get Rudy Gobert, and he's not going to give you the impact if you're Minnesota, in my opinion, that you need. Theoretically, you'd be like, okay, let's go out there and trade Rudy Gobert, which is easier said than done because is anybody going to go out there and take on that contract? But I feel like, maybe it might be time for Minnesota to look to move on from him. That's just throwing it out there. Mike Conley, a veteran point guard, but of course, he really was not used in this series for the Minnesota Timberwolves. Would they want to get younger at the point guard position? That would be interesting to see if the Timberwolves could get younger at the point guard position, just throwing it out there and just have Ant Man in that off guard spot. And then on top of that, for me, if Anthony Edwards is the Batman for the Minnesota Timberwolves, are they going to get him a Robin? Because you look at it, you've got quality players around Anthony Edwards, but it's one of those where you don't have somebody who, puts fear in an opposing team from the standpoint that, hey, you know what? This guy's going to go out there and consistently get 25 points per game. And that's something that's going to be very interesting for Minnesota heading into the summer months. I look at it like this. They're close. Okay, and the culture is changing around this team. I think a lot of that is should be credited to head coach Chris Finch and of course new co-owners Mark Laurie and Alex Rodriguez for what they are looking to accomplish in Minnesota with this team. But again, they've got to find a way to take that next step, and it starts with Anthony Edwards. And I'm not here to sit up here and bash him. Okay, I'm just saying, as good as he is, he's got to go out there and be better in order for Minnesota to take that next step. It's one of those where, like I said before, the tools are in the cupboard. I just think the same way that Ant Man plays for the NBA for the regular season, the same way that he has played in the first two rounds in each of the last 2 years, he's got to find a way to get that to the Western Conference Finals level because it's always going to be tough at that point unless you're facing a team that is dealing with a litany of injuries and you just caught them at the right time. Dallas was a legit team last year. OKC is the real deal, and of course, if they keep this young trio together, they're going to be a force in the Western Conference for quite some time. So if you're Ant Man, you got to figure out a way to get past this trio if you want to get to where you want to get. But nonetheless, big strides for the Minnesota Timberwolves, but those big strides were not enough to get them to that next level. So this summer is going to be very, very important in the Twin Cities to see what the Timberwolves can do to get to that next step. It's going to start with Ant Man. Okay, and like I said before, what can he do to get his game going? It's one of those where I look at Anthony Edwards. He's not a great 3-point shooter. I'm not saying that to knock him. But you know what? Get to the basket. He is so quick. He's so athletic. Get to that basket. Get to the free throw line. That's something that SGA does, and he clearly did throughout this series, and I think that was one of the differences right there for OKC's favor in comparison to Minnesota. If your jump shot's not working, get to that basket. Anthony Edwards, I think he's going to continue to grow. I think he's going to continue to improve. His perimeter game offensively. He has that dog in him at the defensive end. But again, like I said, I think, and this is a credit to Oklahoma City. I think just like Dallas last year, they frustrated Ant-Man. And it was one of those where they didn't allow him to get off. And you could see the frustration in Anthony Edwards throughout this series. And I think that's something that he's going to learn from. I mean, we're still talking about a guy who's very young. We're talking about a guy who's not even 25 years of age right now. And I think the sky is a limit for him. But at the end of the day, OKC was the better team. This team won 68 games uh, during the regular season. They're going to the NBA Finals, and I think it's probably only been like maybe two teams, okay, in NBA history, and I'm just shooting this off the top of my head, that have won as many games as the Oklahoma City Thunder did during the regular season, and they failed to reach the NBA Finals. So that's what the Timberwolves were up against. But nonetheless, it's going to start with Ant Man over the summer. What can he do to improve his game and get himself to the next level? And of course, as Anthony Edwards goes, so do the fortunes of the Minnesota Timberwolves. I will give him credit. He's not been afraid of the smoke, so to speak, throughout his NBA career, but smoke was too much for him in this round. TFX, what's going on, my man? You're saying who matches up better against OKC, Pacers or Knicks? Wow, that's a very interesting question. I'll tell you like this. I'm looking at it like this. I feel like the Knicks, they have the perimeter players to throw at an SGA, but at the end of the day, he's so talented. He's going to find a way to get the basketball and score. Um, the thing for me is, if you're the Knicks, and of course, if you get to the NBA Finals, you get to see yourself see an old friend who you let go, Isaiah Hartenstein, and maybe he could come back to hurt the Knicks, so to speak. Indiana. Indiana and OKC would be a track meet, and I think that would be advantage Oklahoma City because I simply don't see anybody on the Pacers that is going to stop SGA. I think Indiana OKC would be a fun series because you would see the future of the NBA there. But nonetheless, OKC and the Knicks would be a fun series as well. SGA against Jalen Brunson. So either way, I think it's going to be a good series. But I think advantage Oklahoma City. I think this team is legit. They're the real deal, and I think throughout this postseason they have shown why they won 68 games during the regular season. I think this might be the quietest uh, 65 plus win team in NBA history that nobody is talking about. And I think some of it, in my opinion, has to do with the market that they play in. And I'm not saying that to be disrespectful, but I think that the Thunder get over have gotten overshadowed. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of the mainstream media that covers the NBA, they talk about the established guys. And when I say that they're talking about the established guys, if you will, they're talking about the established guys that have more years in the past playing in the NBA than they do in the future. And you've got your LeBrons, your Steph Currys, and your Kevin Durant. No disrespect to those guys. 3 MVPs, 3 Hall of Famers, 3 Olympians, 3 NBA champions, 3 guys that are some of the greatest at what they have done on the basketball court for, almost 2 decades now. But nonetheless, they're not your future. And I think now in this postseason, we're seeing the future. Okay. And we've seen the future in the last couple of years in the postseason. We saw Boston win an NBA championship a couple of years ago. We saw Denver win it the year before that. And now, it's either going to be OKC's time or it's going to be Indiana or the Knicks. We'll find out whether that's going to be tomorrow or I think if the Knicks were to win tomorrow night, game 7 would be Monday night, I do believe. But nonetheless, It's the dawn of a new day in the NBA, and I think it's time for them to start pushing. And they have been pushing, but I think now more than ever, get those young stars out there to the forefront. So either way, I'm looking forward to it. I think if you ask me personally, I think OKC against Indiana or OKC against the Knicks would be a very interesting series, regardless. That's just my 2 cents. Of course, but getting back to Anthony Edwards, clearly he wanted to be there, but he and his Timberwolves couldn't get over the hump, and I think a big reason for that is or was the defense of the Thunder because they simply said, "Hey, you know what, Ant Man, we're not going to let you destroy us." And then on top of that, their big three guys, Jalen Williams, Chet Holmgren, and of course SGA, they came up and delivered. And of course, for Minnesota, they simply didn't have that. But going back to this Western Conference Final Series, I think that the Thunder set the tone in game number one with their 114-88 win. And I love how they didn't get phased by the fact that they got blown out by 42 points in game three. SGA was limited to 14 points in that game. Uh, Probably the worst playoff game of his young NBA career. And we saw how he bounced back in game number four. And I think the way that he bounced back in game number four, the way that Jalen Williams played in that game, and the way that Minnesota could not stop them, I think that took the Timberwolves' heart. And of course, we saw that with their lackluster efforts, if you will, a couple of nights ago when their season was on the line. But nonetheless, it's going to be an interesting offseason this summer in Minnesota. What are they going to do financially? Because again, that luxury tax apron is a game changer throughout the NBA. Of course, with smaller market teams like the T Wolves, how do they react to that? What are they going to do to put the pieces around Anthony Edwards, if you will, to try to get them over that hump? And what's Ant Man going to do? Not trying to sound like a broken record. What's he going to do? Okay, as well to take his game to that next level. But nonetheless, strong season for the Minnesota Timberwolves, but of course, it wasn't strong enough for them to get where they wanted to get. So let's see how Ant Man and company bounce back, improve, and rebound for next season. But folks, that is going to wrap it up on this edition of 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast. And as always, if you like what you heard and saw, please feel free to hit that like button as well as subscribing to this channel. Like I always say, it is greatly appreciated. Also, if you're on the X, formerly known as Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you give me that follow, I'll give you that follow right back. Before I say anything else, TFX, as always, it is good to hear you chiming in or see you chiming in, rather. I'm not hearing you, but nonetheless, thank you for the support. No more streams tonight. I'm gonna treat this like a old school Mike Tyson fight from about 35, 40 years ago. Nonetheless, if you didn't catch it in the first couple of rounds, you ain't catching it. So I mean, TFX, I don't know how old you are, but if you remember how Tyson was in his prime, I tell you like that, you know where I'm coming from on that. But this is the only one for tonight. But also, you can check us out on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. As far as I'm concerned, shameless plug, but one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. Yeah, you're saying, yeah, 3 seconds till a KO. Yeah, honestly, just changing gears real quick. The fighter introductions and all the dignitaries at ringside typically lasted longer than most of Mike Tyson's fights in his prime, for all you youngsters out there. And also, just like it is on the X, you can check me out on Instagram at 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge. And like I always say, give me that follow. I will give you that follow right back. So, switching gears to basketball real quick before we chime off. Let's see if the Pacers are going to be able to close out the Knicks at home last night. Indiana did not play well in game number five. The Knicks have some confidence and they're looking to get that series back to MSG. And of course, if they do, MSG is going to be raucous come, I think it's Monday night for game seven. But nonetheless, you look at it, like I said before, Indiana versus OKC or OKC versus New York, I think either way is going to be a solid series. But until next time, fine folks, my name is William Martin. I am signing off, and I'm saying thanks once again for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. Be well, everybody.